Well, I'm sure you've heard of anorexia, but have you heard of Xenomelia or apotemnophilia? Have you heard of BIID, body integrity identity disorder? That one describes the extremely rare phenomenon of people who desire the amputation of one or more healthy limbs or who desire a paralysis. Some of these people mutilate themselves. Others ask surgeons for an amputation or for the transection of their spinal cord. Now, according to Wikipedia, it's also called amputee identity disorder, or xenomelia, and formerly called apotemnophilia. It's a rare mental disorder characterized by a desire to have a sensory or physical disability or feeling discomfort with being able-bodied, beginning in early adolescence and resulting in harmful consequences. People with this condition may refer to themselves as transabled. For example, here's a woman who blinded herself. According to Jewel, her fascination with blindness began in her early childhood. Here's the case reported recently of a 20-year-old patient who said he had been experiencing incessant thoughts about the fourth and fifth fingers on his left hand. The two fingers that caused him stress were ultimately cut off in a bid to treat him. And there are plenty more examples. And I'm sure you know someone who has had, sadly, anorexia nervosa. According to the Mayo Clinic, anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by an abnormally low body weight, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted perception of weight. No matter how much weight is lost, the person continues to fear weight gain. Anorexia isn't really about food. It's an extremely unhealthy and sometimes life-threatening way to cope with emotional problems. And when you have anorexia, you often equate thinness with self-worth. But how do we respond to anorexia? Do we offer weight loss pills, liposuction, prescriptions for enemas? Of course not. That would not be loving or healthy. No, there are a number of options: psychotherapy, family-based therapy, nutrition support, treatment to restore health. But what you'll notice is that none of these treatments for either xenomelia or anorexia involve cutting the body. That would simply worsen the confusion and harm. But here's a case from last year where the rules completely change for a condition where the mind rejects the reality and where we should heal the mind, but the cultural narrative is to support the confusion and cut the body. So this is the New Zealand Herald story. And this is how News Hub reported it. Call for better access to gender-affirming cutting, surgery, mastectomies after Kiwi teen attempts to remove own breasts at home. So the focus of the media is on the health system unable to bow to the wishes of the teen rather than the healing of the mind. Now, Glenn Stanton, who's a cultural commentator for Focus on the Family, wrote a report for us back in 2015. Yes, 2015, raising concerns that we had about gender ideology and the confusion it would cause for young people. It was entitled Boys, Girls, Others, Making Sense of the Confusing New World of Gender Identity. And in the discussion, it said this: Paul McHugh, the long celebrated and retired psychiatrist-in-chief at Johns Hopkins Hospital, shut down the practice of many foundationless therapies, including gender reassignment surgery. McHugh explained that gender dysphoria is not a problem of the body, but the mind. This intensely felt sense of being transgendered constitutes a mental disorder in two respects. The first is that the idea of sex misalignment is simply mistaken. It does not correspond with physical reality. And the second is that it can lead to grim psychological outcomes. But it's what is said next that should open our eyes to a story covered by the legacy media last week that I want to show you. And they didn't, or they couldn't see the massive contradiction in the way they covered the case and how they cover the transgender issue. So continuing from the Boys, Girl, Other report, McHugh likens gender identity disorder to such body dysmorphic disorders, anorexia, where some girls believe they're overweight when they are actually life-threateningly underweight. It is not a disorder of the body, but of the mind. Others have likened it to xenomelia, an oppressive sense that one or more of one's limbs do not belong to their own body, and often these strong feelings feelings are present from early childhood. Another form of this is apotemnophilia, a term coincidentally coined by John Money to describe an overwhelmingly sexualized desire to become an amputee. I bet you didn't know this. Gender ideology came about as a result of the radical sexual theory of a sexologist from New Zealand named John Money. Yes, New Zealand, born in Morrinsville. Prior to 1960, no scientists used the word gender as distinguished from sex. It was used grammatically, usually to distinguish sex from sexual intercourse. But Johns Hopkins University, where John Money long held great influence, became a major centre in the emerging field of sex reassignment surgery, conducting the first surgeries in 1960. But back to Xenomelia and apotemnophilia. I always have trouble saying that word. There are more people suffering from these disorders than one would imagine, and are very real. Such people feel, in fact they know, that a particular arm or leg is not theirs and desperately want it removed. They speak of such limbs like transgender folks speak of their bodies, and they are able to tell you precisely at what point on the limb it ceases to be theirs, and thus they want the amputation made at that particular point. Carl Elliott, a medical doctor and philosopher of psychiatry, has studied the subject in depth and is struck by how these patients mimic the gender dysphoric in their use of language and identity, and being in describing the desire to have particular limbs amputated. Examples from his experience, quote, "I always felt like I should be an amputee." Quote, "I have felt this is who I was." Quote, "It feels right, the way I should have always been, and for some reason in line with what I think my body ought to have been like." And another quote, "Just as a transsexual is not happy with his own body but longs to have the body of another sex, in the same way I am not happy with my present body but long for a peg leg." Now, as one doctor who remarkably does such amputations explained, the patients he sees feel, quote, "that their body is incomplete with their normal complement of 4 limbs. It sounds like they've been reading the garbage that just came out of the Law Commission, doesn't it, which was rife with dangerous and misleading gender ideology, ignoring the reality of being a woman. Now, the reason I tell you all this is because of a story in the media last week. It was on the 6 p.m. news on 3 News, and it was also covered in the New Zealand Herald. So firstly, from the New Zealand Herald, a surgeon has been jailed, this is in the UK, for 32 months after he froze and amputated his legs for his own sexual gratification. Neil Hopper, 49 years old, received £466,000, $1 million, from insurers after claiming that injuries to his legs were the result of sepsis rather than self-inflicted. The vascular surgeon, who carried out hundreds of amputation operations and worked at the Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust for a decade, used dry ice to freeze his legs. Now, his former patients are now demanding an independent inquiry to establish whether any of them may have had unnecessary surgery. Truro Crown Court heard that Hopper, who was married with children, had harboured a long-held sexual fetish to have his legs amputated. He pleaded guilty to fraud and also to possessing extreme pornography. Now, at the time, I thought this was a Babylon Bee story, actually. I mean, the guy's name is Neil Hopper. Neil Hopper. No legs. Yeah. But, sadly, it's a true story. Now, I'll come back to the New Zealand Herald report in a minute because there's an incredible admission at the end of the report. I'm not sure the New Zealand Herald editors realised what they were saying when they printed this. But firstly, the 3 News report, which actually came from Channel 4 News in the UK. So let's watch that clip.
I'm a vascular surgeon who works in Truro. I've just been discharged from hospital.
Those who knew him thought it was a remarkable story. A vascular surgeon who'd spent his career amputating the limbs of his patients, now having amputations himself.
You can see I'm rocking the NHS legs.
But today, Neil Hopper admitted that the need for the life-changing operation was self-inflicted, after having a long-standing and apparently sexually motivated obsession with becoming an amputee. It was in 2019 that he used ice and dry ice to freeze his own legs to the point that they had to be removed in hospital, and went on to make 2 false insurance claims. In the meantime, he was on TV talking about his life as a surgeon since losing his legs.
How would you sum up the last year?
Yeah, it's probably been the toughest year of my life.
He also kept people updated on his journey on Instagram, his handle, The Bionic Surgeon. But then in 2023 came his arrest as part of an investigation into this man, Marius Gustafsson, a man who ran a website called The Eunuch Maker, which sold videos of amputations and body modification, including penises being removed. Hopper admitted 3 charges of possessing extreme pornographic images from Gustafsson's site, and the court heard as he was freezing his own leg that he messaged Gustafsson saying, "It's going to be awesome being a double amputee," and then sent an explicit image. In court, the defence said he had dysphoria, describing loathings towards himself from a young age, including of his own feet, and that while he didn't regret the amputations, he bitterly regretted the dishonesty that flowed from it.
Yeah, now the reporter seems to be shocked about the statement, penises being removed. Is she aware of what biological males who think they are females go through surgically in the name of gender affirmation treatment and gender identity? And there's some additional information on the story from the New York Post.
This 49-year-old vascular surgeon was once named the bravest in Britain after he had to amputate both of his legs. But now Neil Hopper, who performed hundreds of amputation operations of his own, has pleaded guilty to 2 fraud charges after he told insurers that his legs needed to be removed because of sepsis and not because of a self-inflicted injury. According to reports from inside the courtroom, Hopper actually froze his own legs with ice and dry ice to ensure his legs would be removed. According to testimony laid out against Hopper in court, the surgeon wanted his legs to be chopped off because of an obsession with removing parts of his own body and a sexual interest in doing so. In a disturbing twist to the story, the Welsh surgeon also admitted to possessing extreme pornography. Investigators found that between 2018 and 2020, Hopper bought 3 videos from a now-defunct webpage called the Eunuch Maker, an extreme body modification site which showcased disturbing mutilation live streams and videos. Gustafsson's website included disturbing and dangerous body modifications such as limb freezing, penis castrations, and testicle crushing. One man from London is even serving prison time for slicing off Gustafsson's penis with a kitchen knife. In 2019, Hopper told the BBC that he was rushed to the hospital after reportedly not feeling well following a family camping trip. At the hospital, the then 46-year-old was treated for suspected sepsis, a potentially life-threatening medical condition where the body fights an infection too much, damaging nearby organs and tissues. After complaining about pain in his feet, surgeons decided to amputate both of Hopper's legs. According to court testimony, Hopper didn't reveal to his medical team the real cause of his leg injuries. The double amputee surgeon with prosthetic limbs then started sharing his journey on social media and his own website, bionicsurgeon.net. Prosecutors told the court that Hopper enjoyed the media interest.
How would you sum up the last year?
Yeah, it's probably been the toughest year of my life. That goes without saying. I think I hit some of the biggest lows I've ever hit in my life, but also it's fair to say it hasn't all been bad as well. It's like somebody performs an audit of your life and you realise that lots of people are important to you and you're important to them.
A year after his amputation surgery, Hopper posted a video on his YouTube channel sharing his highs and lows of his first year as a double leg amputee.
I've come a long way. I'm more active than I've almost ever been. I've been out on a trike a lot. I'll put some videos of that up at some point. I do a lot of walking. I can walk. I've walked 4 miles across country paths on my legs without much difficulty at all.
Hopper now reportedly says he regrets the dishonesty surrounding his double leg amputation, but does not regret having his legs removed.
Whew. Yep, no regrets, apparently. That's the mental illness speaking, eh? Now, you'll have noted that the Channel 4 interview only said that the amputations were for sexual perversion reasons. But here's the interesting thing. Back to the New Zealand Herald. And here's the key bit right at the end. It says this. Defence lawyer Andrew Langdon, KC, said his client had grown up in a rural village in Wales and felt he was in the wrong body from a young age. Sound familiar? He was troubled by his gender. He wanted to be female, said the lawyer. Langdon, the lawyer, told how Hopper identified with body integrity disorder, which is body integrity identity disorder, which is defined as a desire to amputate one or more healthy limbs. Hopper described his thoughts about amputating his feet as persistent, never ending. As you watch this troubling case, what would you say, just as a non-medical observer like me, is needed by Dr. Hopper? Counselling? Mental wellness? Healing of the mind? Yeah. Or should we affirm the delusion, call an inside out, the AIDS Foundation, family planning, and fund him to ice and cut off other limbs for his fulfillment and happiness, of course? Rather than gender affirmation, let's call it amputation affirmation. Well, don't say that out loud. The Ministry of Health just might think it's a valid thing to do. In fact, if it wasn't for his fraudulent activity and stealing of money, you almost wonder whether this might not have been a media story. But I've talked about this recently with all of these cases, that we should heal the mind, not cut the body. But remember that gender-affirming surgical procedures for biological females who want to be male involve mastectomy, chest masculinization surgery they call it, while for biological men, for boys wanting to be women, this encompasses a range of feminizing procedures such as tracheal shave, breast augmentation, and vaginoplasty, which, guys, would make your eyes water just thinking about. But think about it. All these procedures involve chopping off healthy body parts in the interests of ideology, just like Dr. Hopper. But chopping the body is not the answer, is it? Now, just to confirm this, here's the latest research. The study was by researchers from the Baylor College of Medicine and the University of Texas, was published in Oxford's Journal of Sexual Medicine, sampled over 100,000 patients, and they found that those undergoing transgender surgery were at significantly higher risk for depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and substance abuse disorders than those without surgery. They found that sex change surgery doubles depression rates amongst gender dysphoric individuals rather than reducing them. And they conclude, quote, findings suggest the necessity for gender-sensitive mental health support following gender-affirming surgery to address post-surgical psychological risks, end quote. Well, perhaps the mental health support should come first. Rather than cutting the body, heal the mind, just as we would do for someone with anorexia nervosa or body integrity identity dysphoria. But let me just close with the report I started with. And it says this: just as it was unthinkable decades ago that people could have elective surgery in mainstream medical facilities to have their breasts and genitalia cut from their bodies, it is unfathomable that the same could happen in this instance. These are in the mind of the individual, and no one can refute that their feelings are not genuine. Neither can such individuals seem to live peaceably in their present state, and they are nearly obsessed with having their body parts removed. Some have resorted to cutting off their body limbs themselves, with knives, power saws, and even placing limbs on railway tracks to be severed. We saw that recent New Zealand example, tragic case of a teenager girl. Regardless of whether those with apotemnophilia believe they were born this way, it would be hard to argue such a drastic procedure of cutting off their perfectly healthy body parts is medically ethical. To try to solve a psychiatric problem by removing major body parts is not far from barbarism. But there is a prime difference between gender and limb dysphoria. Those with Xenomelia or apotemnophilia are not politically and culturally organised and have not yet cloaked their desire for disfigurement as a human right. In other words, they don't have a Inside Out or a Green Party or a Burnett Foundation to lobby for them, unlike transgender confused kids who they want to chemicalise and castrate and confuse. You know, it is way past time New Zealand started healing the mind of vulnerable, confused young people rather than aiding in their castration, chemicalisation and confusion. Way past time.